Hey, it's Jeff Bergman with SAT Success Secrets. And right now what I want to do is show you how to use the main idea of the passage we just read together, that passage about the old and new views of pain, and how to use that main idea, how to take the main idea and how to use it to answer the questions. Now, I've summed up the main idea. Right after I read it, I gave you kind of a longer version of the main idea. That's what I literally had in my mind right after I was done reading. Since I had to make these files so that I could put on the screen and record and show you, I took a minute and summed up the main idea. I summed it up more simply. And it's up there in red. You can read it. It's that the old idea of pain, which we get from René Descartes hundreds of years ago, is that pain is a purely physical phenomenon. It's a one-way transmission that goes from the injured tissue to the brain. And then there's a new idea that the author pretty much agrees with. The new idea is that the mind controls how much pain we feel. He calls it the gate control theory of pain. The mind controls how much pain we feel when we have some sort of injury or painful stimulus, and it even controls whether we feel it at all. And then I don't have it in red, but remember he asked that question at the end. He said, well, that new explanation doesn't address one question, which is what happens when we feel pain but don't have an injury. And what he says, even though he doesn't have any experiments, he just mentions at the end, he says that too has to come from the mind. So that's the main point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I answer questions when I haven't seen the questions. This is as close to honest as I'm thinking about it when I actually see them for the first time as I could possibly show you. Now I want you to notice a couple of things. The first thing is that I use the main idea to answer the questions. It's often very, very helpful. Either it directly points us to the main idea or it quickly eliminates some answers. The other thing I want you to see is how I quickly use the process of elimination to cross out the ones that aren't right. And then I ask myself, which one's better? I don't mull it over. What I don't do is sit there and think, oh, well, if I thought about it this one way, maybe answer B is correct. But if I thought about it another way, maybe answer C is correct. I could say more, but you'll actually see what I really do when I really go to the questions. So, okay. Question 14. And it's down here. Put it down here. Now, the primary purpose of the passage is, well, the primary purpose of any passage is to convince you of the author's main idea. If it's fiction, it's to tell a story, which has a particular point or main idea. This, of course, is nonfiction. We know what the main idea is. We just talked about it. There's an old idea of pain. There's a new idea of pain. So the primary purpose of the passage is to describe how modern research has updated an old explanation. Well, this looks pretty good. It's probably the answer. He talks a lot about research. We had an old idea of pain. We updated it with a new explanation. Let's check. Argue for the irrelevance of a popular theory. It's not terrible, but he's not saying that the old theory is popular. I mean, it was popular, but he's not describing it as popular. He's saying it was popular for a long time. Now we have a new one. He's also not saying it's irrelevant. He's saying it's wrong. But if I was doing this in my head, I'd cross it out more quickly, but I just wanted to tell you why. C, support a traditional view with new data. No, traditional is old. He's arguing against it. It's not right. D, promote a particular attitude towards physical experience. Well, there's two things wrong with it. He's saying that physical experience is largely mental, that the experience of pain comes from our mind. And better than saying promote a particular attitude, he's actually explaining a new theory. And E, propose an innovative treatment for a medical condition. No, obviously wrong on the face of it. A is the best answer. All right, so here's the next few questions, and you'll see that I just cut and pasted over here the first part of the passage that goes with these four questions. So question 15. Which statement best describes Descartes' theory of pain as presented in lines 3 through 8? 3 through 8. Descartes proposed that pain is purely a physical phenomenon, that tissue injury stimulates specific nerves that transmit an impulse to the brain, causing the mind to perceive pain. The phenomenon, he said, is like pulling a rope to ring a bell in the brain. Okay. A, the brain can shut off pain at will. No, if anything, that goes with the new theory. The brain plays no part in the body's experience of pain. No, the brain is the bell. That's not going to be right. Pain can be triggered in many different ways. No, he's got a particular way. D, pain is a highly personal phenomenon. No, he says it's automatic, essentially. If anything, the personal part comes with a new theory. Oh, look, E, pain is an automatic response to bodily injury. Obviously the answer. Question 16. In line number 11, sign most nearly means. So I'm going to read the sentence. In everyday medicine, doctors see pain in Descartes' terms as a physical process, a sign of tissue injury. So it's not a symbol of tissue injury. It's not a gesture, not an image. He means indication. It's not an omen. Notice most of these other words are other definitions of sign. If we put the word indication back there, in everyday medicine, doctors see pain in Descartes' terms as a physical process, an indication of tissue injury. So we have pain, it indicates that there's a tissue injury, because in Descartes' terms, we feel pain when there is a tissue injury that sends a signal to the brain. Clearly the answer. All of this stuff goes back right to the main idea. Not that we need it, but just notice how closely it ties in. 17. The author implies that the reason the gate control theory was startling, line 23, was that it... Well, let's take a look. All right, I'll read the sentence that it's in. Their most startling suggestion was that what controlled the gate was not just signals from sensory nerves, but also emotions and other output from the brain. So their suggestion goes back to the gate control theory, which attempted to explain why some people reported feeling no pain or less pain. And what is so startling about it, before I even look at the answers, is that number one, Descartes was wrong, and number two, that it's a two-way process, that it's controlled by the brain, not just by the tissue that was injured. So, A, offered an extremely novel explanation. Well, it is novel. Ran counter to people's everyday experiences? Could be. Undermined a respected philosopher's reputation? Well, it's not startling that it undermined his reputation. It was 300 years ago. But you see how these they're a little bit more plausible? Was grounded in an incomprehensible logic. No. Was so sensible it should have been proposed centuries before. That's not what he's saying. So now that we've gone through them quick, we've crossed out two obviously wrong answers. Let's look a little more closely about the answers that remain. And let's keep in mind what the main idea of the passage is. It's not really startling because it undermined Descartes' reputation. It's not really about what people thought of Descartes. Is it startling because it ran counter to people's everyday experience? Or is it startling because it offered an extremely novel explanation? First, when we first looked at this, I was like, I'm not sure. I think I'll leave it in. But notice this word novel. What it means is new. New and different and previously unheard of. And what's the main idea? The main idea is there was an old idea of pain, and it was around for 3 centuries. And it was widely accepted. It's hard to overstate how ingrained it is. In everyday medicine, doctors see pain in Descartes' terms, the guy's saying. And then this new theory came along, the gate control theory, and it argues the first thing that before pain signals reach the brain, it has to go through a gating mechanism, which could ratchet them up and down. That sometimes the gate could simply stop pain impulses from getting to the brain, so that's another suggestion. And then the most startling suggestion of this new theory was that what controlled the gate was not just signals from the sensory nerves, but also emotions and other output from the brain. So there's no people's everyday experiences was startling because it was extremely new. It's the most novel explanation. That it's not only is there a gate, not only does it not happen automatically, but that it's even controlled by the brain, which previously was only the bell, the signal receiver. All right, question 18. The author does which of the following in lines 25 through 27? Let's read it. Well, we were just talking about it. Those lines say they were saying that pulling on the rope need not make the bell ring. The bell itself, the mind, could stop it. So this is what he's doing. He's employing a previously used comparison to explain a newly introduced idea. Previously introduced comparison. It's like pulling a rope to ring a bell in the brain. Let's just look at the rest. Cites an aforementioned study. They have not cited any studies yet. They're about to, but they haven't yet. Signals a digression from the main line of the argument? No, it's the main line of the argument. It's right there. Invokes figurative language to note the drawbacks of the approach? No, there's no drawbacks. He's not noting any drawbacks. Uses personification to explicate the intricacies of a theory? No, it's not personification. He's not making the brain into a person. It's a rope and a bell. So we don't even have to worry about the words explicate, or intricacies. The answer is A. Alrighty. Question 19. And notice what I did here. This is just essentially the rest of the passage. Goes with the rest of the questions we're seeing. In line 49, psychology most nearly means, let's take a look at it. Well, the psychology, we know what psychology means. It's like, it has to do with the mind, and it's the mental makeup and all the mental processes. And he's using these words to describe psychology. Self-discipline, competitiveness, driven personalities, competitive again. So mental makeup is probably right. Emotional trauma, no, it's not trauma. Manipulative behavior, no, it's not that. Clinical investigation, no. Underlying meaning, nope. We can place the phrase mental makeup in there and say probably it has something to do with the mental makeup of ballet dancers, a group distinguished by self-discipline, physical fitness, and competitiveness. blah, blah, their driven personalities. Totally makes sense. Best answer. Question 20. The author suggests that extroverts in line 55 are like ballet dancers with respect to their... Okay. Oh, look, other studies along these lines have shown that extroverts have greater pain tolerance than introverts. So it's about their pain tolerance. So is pain tolerance a reaction to social situations? No, they mean physical pain. Sense of group identity? No. Response to physical stimuli? Physical stimuli is another word for pain. A need for the attention of others? No. Peculiar attraction to suffering? No. C. 21. A defender of the gate control theory would most logically argue that the problem in line 68 may lie not with the theory, but with... Let's start to read, see if that's enough, that whole sentence. There's a problem with it, though, the problem with gate control theory. It explains people who have injuries but feel no pain, but it doesn't explain the reverse, which is far more common. The millions of people who experience chronic pain, such as back pain, with no signs of injury whatsoever. Let's take a look. Medical professionals' unwillingness to accept it as a thoroughly verified hypothesis. That's not where he's going. Diagnostic tools that cannot detect the injuries causing current inexplicable conditions. Could be this. Doctors who misdiagnose intermittent pain as chronic pain? No. D, the unfortunate tendency to medicate even minor ailments? No, that's not what it's about. The willingness of people to subject themselves to stresses that lead to unconventional injuries? Now, I'm going to admit that I wasn't quite sure where they were going with this question at first, but the answer to it is B. Now, the reason that it's B is that someone who is a defender of the gate control theory without the little addendum here that the author is talking about, which is that the mind may be even more powerful than the gate control theory people thought it was. That the mind can still be ringing the pain even if the rope and the clapper are gone. The rope and the clapper meaning the injury to begin with. If you didn't want to accept that, then you'd say, oh, well, there has to still be an injury, and it's just that current diagnostic tools can't detect the injuries, causing the conditions, the inexplicable conditions that cause people to feel pain. All right, and this section is only 23 questions, so these are the last two questions. 22. The author refers to chronic back pain in line 77. Well, we can see where he says, but in the case of something like chronic back pain, there is often no injury. So it's an example of a pain for which there's no injury. So is he an example of something that's costly? No. Dubious because it's often claimed fraudulently. He's not speaking of fraud. Puzzling because it sometimes has no apparent cause. Looks pretty good. Frustrating because it does not improve with therapy. Does not have anything to do with his idea. Tantalizing because it lies beyond the reach of medicine. No. It's puzzling because it sometimes has no apparent cause. And 23, the last sentence of the passage. The rope and clapper are gone, but the bell is still ringing. Serves primarily to express. And we talked about that before. It's the author's one exception or problem with the gate control theory. So, is that the incomprehensibility of scientific judgments? No. It's not the incomprehensibility. The inadequacy of abstract metaphors? No. The futility of theoretical inquiry? No. A conundrum that faces researchers? Well, conundrum means problem. And there's that word problem. This is probably right. And E, an ambiguity at the heart of science. Now, ambiguity sounds like it might work, but it's not at the heart of science. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about this one theory about pain that people have researched and haven't, in this author's opinion, quite solved yet. So it's D. Notice that that's the most in keeping with the main idea. So I hope that helps. I hope that clears up for you how to use the process of elimination and eliminate any sort of overthinking, get rid of any sort of overthinking, and kind of cleanly work through these questions and the answer choices and arrive at the best answer choice that you can.